Today we are going to code the composite trapezoidal rule into MATLAB, and what I'd like to do is just real quickly review the formula that we use for the trapezoidal rule. It's this thing up here. Okay. And just to make this a little bit easier to code, I'm going to make a couple changes. So A here is going to be x sub 0, and B will be x sub n. Okay. So I'm going to change this here to x sub 0 and this over here to x sub n. Okay. And the next thing that I'm going to do is, this was the a value plus the spacing, right? We were spacing things out by h, right? H was equal to b minus a divided by n. Okay. Well, let's just label these as, you know, x sub 1, x sub 2. So I'm just going to write in here x sub I. And so this does mean when we do go to code this into MATLAB, we'll need probably a for loop for this, and we'll also need to compute the function value at x naught and at x sub n. We'll want to add all those together and then finally multiply by this b minus a over 2n. Okay. Let's go ahead and go into MATLAB. All right, here is our function for the trapezoid rule. We're going to name it trap. So make sure to save the file name the same as the function name. Our input, so you're going to input the function you want to integrate. These are going to be your limits of integration. And then n will be your number of subintervals. Okay, and so, right, the larger that number is, the more accurate it'll be, but the longer it'll take to arrive at the answer. And then lastly, var argin. Okay, so maybe there are some extra arguments that you have for the function here that you'd like to plug in. Okay. So let's go down here and we'll start dealing with the input arguments. So if nargin is less than 3, we would like there to be an error, okay, at least 3 input arguments required. And then comma end. And actually, rather than dealing with if nargin is less than 4, let's put in something else here. And so this is actually something that we probably haven't thought about since early in the quarter, but we have a logical not here. Okay. So when I put this tilde here and there's not an equal sign around, is what I mean is if something is not true. Okay. And so I'm going to put that something here in the parentheses. So we're saying if B, we're saying that we would like B to be greater than A, but if it's not, what are we going to do? Okay. And so the answer is we're going to display an error. Okay. And that error is that the upper bound must be greater than the lower bound. And we just need a comma and then an end. And now we'll deal with if we have less than 4 input arguments. So if nargin is less than 4, or n is empty, so is empty of n, okay, what do we want to set the default to be? And in our comments up there, you can see we want the default to be actually 100. So I'm going to put in here a comma, and then n equals 100, semicolon, end. Okay. So there's dealing with nargin less than 4. Okay. We can now get into actually creating the for loop. Okay. There's only 2 more lines that are going to come before it. So first of all, the first x that we want to plug into our function is going to be a. Okay, right, that's the leftmost point. We also are going to want our spacing, which should be b minus a all over n. So we have both of those. And remember, let's go back to one note here real quick. Before we get into our for loop, we want to compute f of that first value here. Okay. Let's go in here and do that. Okay. So we're going to have s equals func of a comma. So you'll probably just be plugging in a, but just in case you have a function that has some extra inputs here, we'll have var argin. There we go. Okay, so that's the first term. Okay, let's go on to the next line here. So next we're going to do for I equals, and let's go look. It was 1 to n minus 1. So 1 to n minus 1. All right, and next we're going to set up the h is changing, right? Okay. So the x's are always changing by h. They keep getting h bigger. Okay. So we'll start off with x being a before the for loop, but as soon as we get into the for loop, we're going to add the spacing to x. And that'll be the next thing that we'll plug into our function. So we're going to have s equals s plus 2 times func of x, comma, var argin. Right, and this 2 here, remember we had a 2 in front of the summation, or all these middle terms here, right? Let's see what that looked like. Okay. We're on this portion here right now. Okay. We're doing 2 times all of those function values. Okay. Next, we're going to end our loop. And now we have that last value to compute. So s is equal to s plus, and this time we just need to plug in b into the function. So func of, and our last one here, again, is b, and then var argin. There we go. And we'll go ahead and we'll suppress that too. And the last thing we want here is the value of the integral. And so remember, we had to multiply by something first. We had this b minus a divided by 2 times n, and then that was all times s. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to test this out, make sure we didn't make any typos as we were coding this. But let's go ahead and save it. I've just saved it. And let's test out actually not only this trap function we created, but actually MATLAB actually has an integral function. Okay. Let's start off with that. Let's do integral. Okay. Let's pick a function. Okay. How about x squared plus 1? Keep it simple here. So there's our function, and we want to integrate it from, let's say, 0 to 7. Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and hit enter and see what we get. We got 121.33333. Okay. Let's test out our trap function and see how well it does. Okay. So I'll still have at x, and then x squared plus 1, 0 to 7, and if we don't put in the number of subintervals, it'll use the default, which is 100. Let's go ahead and check that out. Okay. And I just need to hit enter. Okay. All right. So I am actually seeing one thing that I do want to change in my code. It is that I left x unsuppressed here, but you can see we got 121.3391, and before that, using the integral function, we had 123.3333. So very close. Okay. Very close. Yeah, let's just go in here and suppress x, and then this is done. So it's just this line 20 that was messing everything up. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to up arrow and test it out again. And yeah, now the only thing that popped out was this 121.339.